My parents made me a servant at my sister's wedding, not knowing the secret I've been hiding for the last 7 years. A secret that would burn everything they built to the ground. Stay with me as I tell you this whole story, and if it reaches your heart, please support the channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing it with the people who matter to you. I arrived at Ember's wedding venue with a clipboard in my hand, not because I wanted to help, but because my parents ordered me to. My mom, Lila Aldridge, barely looked at me when she said, "Raina, you'll handle the setup. Don't embarrass us." My dad, Morris, only nodded as if I should be grateful they allowed me to show my face at all. And Ember, my perfect older sister, smiled at me the way people smile at waiters who bring the wrong order. I kept quiet. I always do. They think silence means weakness, but they have no idea what my silence has built. They don't know where I've been or what I've become in the 7 years since I walked out of that house with nothing but a backpack. They don't know I promised myself I would never let them break me again. As I walked through the decorated hall, fixing chairs and adjusting flower stands like they told me to, old memories pushed into my mind. Ember twirling in new dresses while I scrubbed the floors. My parents calling me unmotivated because I didn't have opportunities handed to me the way she did. Every holiday, every birthday, I was the helper, the background, the shadow. And today, they wanted me to play the same role again. "Raina," my mother snapped, pointing at a stack of plates. "These need to be cleaned. Quickly. Guests will be here soon." I could hear the annoyance in her voice, the same tone she used when I was 16 and dared to tell her my dreams. She never asked about my life after I left. She never cared. I picked up the plates, not because I accepted their treatment, but because I knew something they didn't. This was the last day they would ever speak to me like that. They didn't know about the life I built behind their backs. They didn't know the people who respected me, the work I fought for, the business I owned, or the power I held. They didn't know the version of me that no longer bowed to anyone. As I worked quietly, guests started walking in. Some greeted Ember with hugs and praise. Others looked at me like I was just one of the staff, and honestly, I didn't blame them. My own family had trained them to see me this way. But inside, I felt a calm fire. Let them misjudge me. Let them laugh. Let them believe I'm nothing. Because by the end of this wedding, every single person here would learn exactly who I am. And my parents would finally understand the cost of pushing away the daughter they never bothered to know. When I walked across the venue carrying trays and running errands, the smell of flowers and wedding perfume kept pulling me back into memories I never wanted. Ember had always been the star of the family. Even when we were little, she wore the prettiest dresses while I wore hand-me-downs. She got dance classes, summer camps, new phones every year. I got chores. That was my life, cleaning, folding, cooking, fetching. While the three of them smiled like they were some perfect American family. Whenever I dared to talk about my dreams, my mom would sigh and say, "Raina, don't waste our time. Focus on something realistic." My dad would pat Ember's shoulder, telling her she would make them proud someday. They never said that to me. They barely looked at me unless they needed something done. Even at family gatherings, I remember my mother laughing with her friends, saying I was directionless and didn't know what I wanted. I knew exactly what I wanted. I just never had the space to say it. The older I got, the clearer it became. Ember was the favorite, and I was the worker. She would make a mess, and I would clean it. She would have tantrums, and I would be blamed. Every good thing she did was celebrated. Every good thing I did was ignored. I learned to keep quiet, keep my head down, and stay out of their way. But inside, something was building, something I didn't have a name for at the time. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was pain. Maybe both. When I turned 18, I packed a small bag before sunrise. I didn't leave a note. I didn't say goodbye. I walked out the back door and didn't look back. No one stopped me. No one called my name. For a long time, I wondered if they even noticed I was gone. Days passed. Weeks. Months. Not a single message. Not a single, "Are you okay?" I got my answer. They didn't care. And that hurt more than anything they'd ever said. But leaving home was the first time I felt free. I worked whatever jobs I could find. Diners, cleaning shifts, late-night stalking. I saved every dollar. I studied whenever I wasn't working. I pushed myself because I knew the only person I could depend on was me. I built a life piece by piece, one exhausting day at a time. And they didn't know any of it. 7 years passed before I ever heard from them. And it wasn't a call to reconnect or apologize. It was a message from my mother telling me Ember was getting married, and they expected me to help. Not attend. Help. like I was still their unpaid housemaid. Walking through the wedding venue now, doing the tasks they handed me, I felt that old anger rising. They ignored my existence until they needed a servant again. They still saw me as the girl who would swallow everything and say nothing. But they had no idea the woman I had become. The wedding rehearsal hadn't even fully started when my mother began barking orders at me like I was some worker she hired off a job board. "Reina, wipe down those tables. They look streaky," she snapped, waving her hand as if the sight of me annoyed her. I grabbed a cloth and started cleaning, even though the tables were already spotless. She didn't care about the work itself. She only cared that I was doing it. After that, she shoved a box of tiny party favors into my arms. "Pack these neatly. Don't mess them up. Ember wants everything perfect." Ember always wanted everything perfect, especially the parts that made her look good. I sat on the floor, stuffing candy and ribbons into tiny bags while the bridesmaids laughed loudly about something across the room. When I finished, I brought the box to Ember. She looked at me, then quickly looked away like she didn't want anyone to see us standing too close. One of the bridesmaids asked, "Who's she?" And without blinking, Ember said, "Oh, she's just help. My mom brought her in for the wedding. Just help." My own sister, who ate meals I cooked and wore clothes I ironed for most of her life, now acted like she had never seen me before. The bridesmaids nodded, barely giving me a glance. I felt something inside me twist, but I kept my face straight. I knew who I was. And soon, everyone else would too. But the day wasn't done humiliating me. My mother dragged me to Ember's dressing room with an armful of gowns. "Steam these," she ordered. "Make sure there are no wrinkles. Ember can't look cheap." I stood there steaming her luxury dresses while Ember scrolled through her phone, acting like I didn't exist. Every now and then she tossed a comment to her friends about how stressful the wedding was. None of them realized I was the one doing the work while she complained about being tired. When I carried the dresses out, my dad called me over and handed me a list. "Run to the florist. They forgot some arrangements," he said, not even looking up from his phone. It wasn't a question. It was an expectation, the same old rhythm from my childhood. Reina does the jobs no one else wants to do. As I walked across the venue, I heard whispers from relatives who hadn't seen me in years. "Is that Reina? Didn't she drop out of life or something?" Her parents said she never had ambition. Poor thing, still floating around doing small jobs. Every word felt like a needle. They believed everything my parents told them. They never knew the truth. None of them cared enough to ask. But while they whispered, I stayed calm. I knew something they didn't. Every order, every insult, every lie they repeated strengthened the moment I was planning. The moment everything flipped. The moment they would see me, not as help, not as a failure, but as someone they should have never underestimated. 7 years ago, when I walked out of my parents' house before sunrise, I didn't know what my future would look like. All I knew was that staying there would crush me. I started with nothing. No savings, no support, not even a phone call from anyone asking if I was safe. I found work wherever I could. Morning shifts at a diner, late-night cleaning in office buildings, weekend jobs stocking shelves at a grocery store. I slept in small rooms, sometimes shared with strangers, sometimes with barely enough space to stretch my legs. But even then, even in those long, tired nights, I knew I would never go back to that house as the same girl they threw away. I enrolled in community college with money I saved from tips. I studied between shifts, falling asleep over textbooks but refusing to stop. When I graduated, I moved on to a business program. I didn't have luxury or comfort, but I had determination. I kept working, kept climbing, kept learning how the world worked, especially money, ownership, and leverage. They were tools my family had never bothered to understand. Somewhere along the way, I met people who believed in me more than my own family ever did. I joined a small investment group as an assistant, then a researcher, then a partner. I studied deals, risks, failing companies, and how to bring them back to life. And one day, an opportunity appeared that made everything suddenly align. Aldridge Construction, my parents' business, was drowning in debt. They were months away from losing everything. The company they bragged about for years was collapsing. The buyer who stepped in to save it was a firm they'd never heard of, a new corporation with a clean name and quiet power. A corporation that I owned. They never thought to question who bought them out. They signed every document. They handed over every controlling share. They surrendered every bit of authority to a faceless entity they assumed had nothing to do with the daughter they discarded. That daughter was me. I became their biggest financial backer, the silent owner of the very company that kept their lights on. I kept my name off everything, not out of fear, but because I wanted this moment. The wedding day, the day they treated me like dirt in front of dozens of witnesses. To be the day they learned exactly who they had underestimated. As I stood in the wedding venue now, carrying trays, cleaning tables, steaming dresses, I wasn't the broken girl they thought I was. I was the woman who could end their business with a single signature. The woman who controlled the future of Aldridge Construction. The woman who had built a life they knew nothing about. And I wasn't revealing anything yet. Not until they showed their true colors to everyone watching. Not until the weight of their cruelty was visible to every guest. Then I would open the folder. Then I would speak. Then everything would change. The bridal brunch was supposed to be a light, happy event, filled with laughter and celebration. Instead, it became the moment everything inside me finally snapped. I walked into the decorated garden area carrying trays of drinks, trying to keep my head down as Ember and her bridesmaids posed for pictures. They were all glowing with excitement, their dresses perfectly styled, their makeup flawless. And there I was, treated like the invisible worker who didn't belong anywhere near them. "Raina," my mother hissed, waving me over like she was swatting at a fly. "Come here. Ember needs help." I set the tray down and stepped closer, and that's when Ember lifted her foot slightly, not even looking at me. "Kneel," she said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. There were gasps from the bridesmaids, but none of them spoke up. They watched, entertained, waiting to see how far Ember would push me. I lowered myself onto my knees, my hands shaking as I picked up the pair of white bridal heels. Ember smirked down at me like she owned the world. "You know," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "it still surprises me that you never figured out your life. I mean, look at you. No real future, no direction, nothing to show. At least you're useful for something today." A few bridesmaids laughed. Someone covered her mouth, pretending to hide it. My face burned, but I kept my expression calm. If they thought I was weak, they were about to learn otherwise, but not yet. I slipped the shoe onto her foot carefully, but before I could reach for the other one, my mother stepped closer. "Raina, you're being slow again. Always so slow. Honestly, Ember deserves better help." The word help hit me like it always did, a reminder of the role they forced me into. I placed the second shoe on her foot without looking up, my jaw tight, my hands cold. Just as I stood up, thinking I could escape for a moment, my father came over with a scowl. "You don't need to eat," he said. "We're short on time. Go clean the patio area. It's a mess." I glanced at the brunch table. Everyone else had plates full of food, fruit, pastries, warm dishes, while mine sat untouched. My stomach twisted, but not from hunger. From anger. Because even now, even after 7 years away, they still believed I existed only to serve them. As I walked toward the patio, their voices trailed behind me. She should be grateful we even let her be here. She always needed direction. She'd be lost without us. Each sentence sharpened something inside me. They were wrong. They had always been wrong. And this was the last time they would get away with treating me like nothing. I took a slow breath, feeling the shift inside me, cold, steady, final. I knew what I was going to do. I knew exactly when I would do it. The reception would not end the way they imagined. It would end with the truth. I was wiping down the patio tables, trying to calm the storm building inside me, when I felt someone step beside me. I expected another order, another complaint, another demand. But when I turned, it wasn't one of my parents. It was a man I'd seen earlier, a tall, calm-looking guy with thoughtful eyes. Holden Mercer, the groom's cousin. "You've been working non-stop," he said quietly. "Are you part of the staff?" For a second, I almost laughed. Staff would have been a promotion compared to what my family considered me. But I kept my voice even. Something like that. Holden watched me carefully, not in a judgmental way, but like he was trying to understand something deeper. He glanced toward the brunch table where Ember and her bridesmaids were still laughing, and my mother was loudly criticizing a centerpiece that wasn't perfectly symmetrical. "That woman, your mom, right? She talks to you like..." He paused, searching for the right words. "Like you're not family at all." I didn't answer. I just kept wiping the table, even though it didn't need wiping. Staying busy kept my emotions from spilling over. But Holden didn't walk away. "And Ember," he added, "she treated you like you were invisible. Or disposable." I felt a tightness in my throat. Someone noticing wasn't part of my plan. I didn't want sympathy. I didn't need rescuing. I just needed my moment. "It's complicated," I finally said, keeping my tone light, like it didn't matter. But Holden wasn't fooled. "No," he said softly. "It's cruel. That's what it is." I blinked, caught off guard. No one in my family had ever called their behavior what it truly was. They called it discipline. They called it tough love. They called it Raina's fault. But here was a stranger, someone with no reason to lie, saying the thing I had buried for years. Holden leaned against the table, his voice low. "I've been watching since the rehearsal yesterday. You run every errand. You get blamed for everything. And they celebrate Ember like she's a queen." He paused. "I don't buy it. There's more to you than they want people to see." A strange warmth spread through me, mixed with a sting. I wasn't used to being seen, not really. Not for who I was, or what I was capable of, or what I'd survived. But I couldn't let him into my secret. "Not yet. I'm fine," I said softly. "Really?" Holden shook his head. "You don't have to pretend with me." I looked at him then, really looked. There was no pity in his eyes. No judgment. Just quiet understanding. He wasn't trying to save me. He wasn't trying to interfere. He was just acknowledging what everyone else ignored. And somehow, that meant more than I expected. As I stepped away to go finish another useless chore, Holden said, "Whatever they think you are, I can tell they're wrong." His words stayed with me. If even an outsider could recognize their cruelty, then the truth would hit even harder when I revealed who I had become. It wouldn't just be revenge. It would be justice, witnessed by everyone. I stepped away from the noise of the brunch, needing a moment to breathe and steady myself. The air outside was cooler, calmer, nothing like the chaos happening inside that building. I walked toward the edge of the parking lot, staring at the hills in the distance, reminding myself why I was here and what I had worked for these past 7 years. My hands were still trembling slightly from the humiliation, but my mind was sharper than ever. Then I saw a black sedan pull up near the entrance. A man in a suit stepped out, holding a slim envelope with a golden seal. The moment I saw it, my heartbeat changed. I recognized the seal. My attorney's firm. The final documents. He walked straight toward me. "Miss Raina Aldridge?" he asked formally, even though he already knew the answer. "Yes." My voice sounded steadier than I felt. He handed me the envelope. "Your attorney said these needed your signature immediately. Everything inside has been finalized." I thanked him and stepped aside, holding the envelope with both hands. It felt heavier than paper should feel, like it was carrying years of pain, effort, and sacrifice. I opened it slowly, and there it was, the full confirmation that I now legally controlled Aldridge Construction, the business my parents built, the business they thought they still owned. There was also a second document, a final note about the land attached to the wedding venue. My parents still owed money on it, money they never managed to pay. That debt had quietly shifted under my company as well. Which meant I didn't just control their business. I controlled the property hosting this entire wedding. My hands closed around the folder. I had all the power they spent their lives chasing, all the security they denied me, all the success they insisted I could never reach. And they had no idea. Not yet. For a moment, I closed my eyes, imagining the expressions on their faces when they learned the truth. They would be standing there, proud of their golden daughter, laughing at my expense, and I would be the one holding everything they once valued. Not out of pettiness, not out of cruelty, but because they needed to face the reality they created. I tucked the envelope inside my jacket, close to my chest. This wasn't just paperwork. This was proof that I had built a life without them. Proof that their cruelty hadn't destroyed me. Proof that I had risen far beyond the role they tried to trap me in. As I walked back toward the venue, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The fear was gone. The hesitation was gone. The pain was still there, but now it had purpose. Tonight, at the reception, I would open this folder. I would speak my truth, and they would finally see what they lost when they abandoned me. Raina had expected their pettiness, but nothing prepared her for how boldly Morris and Lila performed it under the chandeliers of the reception hall. Ember stood at the center of the stage, glass raised, her voice sweetened with practiced pride. "To my parents," she said, "for raising me to shine. And to Raina, our family helper, who always knows how to stay out of the way." Laughter rippled across the tables, thin and uncomfortable, but it was laughter all the same. Raina felt it like a slap she didn't flinch from. Her pulse didn't spike. Her face didn't twitch. She had shed her last tear for these people long ago. Instead, she watched Holden from the corner of her eye. He wasn't laughing. His jaw tightened, gaze fixed on her with a silent question. "How long will you let them do this?" She didn't answer with words. She answered by standing. The scrape of her chair cut through the echo of Ember's giggles. Raina smoothed her dress, the movements slow, deliberate. Then she lifted the black folder she had kept tucked beneath her shawl. Its weight steadied her. Its meaning fueled her. She walked toward the stage. A hush spread through the room like a cold wind. Ember's smile faltered, her hand lowering. Morris frowned, already annoyed. Lila's eyes narrowed, sharp with warning. To them, Raina approaching the stage was an interruption, an inconvenience. To Raina, it was the moment she had waited an entire lifetime for. She stepped up beside Ember, ignoring her sister's confused whisper. She reached for the microphone, and when the DJ hesitated, Holden subtly nodded at him. The mic slipped from his hand and into hers. Raina faced the crowd. Her voice was soft but carried through every corner of the hall. Morris. Lila. Saying their first names felt like peeling off the last layer of fear she'd ever had. Gasps fluttered across the guests. Ember turned pale. You've introduced me tonight as your helper, Raina continued. And for years, you made sure everyone believed that was all I could ever be. But there's something you forgot to mention. Morris stepped forward. Raina, enough. Get off the... She raised a single hand, silencing him. You don't get to interrupt me. Not today. Holden leaned forward in his seat, eyes locked on her. Raina opened the folder. Papers gleamed under the chandeliers, stamped and signed. These, she said, are the finalized ownership documents for Aldridge Enterprises. The company you abandoned. The company you thought would crumble without you. Murmurs burst through the hall. And this, she added, lifting another sheet, is the contract showing that the land you rented for this very wedding, the land you never paid for, now belongs entirely to me. Lila swayed. Ember grabbed her arm. Morris's face drained of color. Raina's voice didn't shake. You wanted the world to laugh at me tonight. Instead, they'll finally see who you really are. And the reception erupted. Raina didn't let the room breathe. She didn't let her parents recover. She kept her voice steady, almost too calm, as she held the mic and faced the crowd that had once believed every lie Morris and Lila spun about her. You want to know the truth? She asked, lifting her chin. Let me start from the beginning. Every eye in the hall fixed on her. Ember's perfect bridal glow dimmed into panic. Morris's hands balled into fists. Lila clutched her clutch like it could shield her from what was coming. When I was 16, Raina said, they stopped calling me their daughter. Not officially. They kept the title because it made them look good. But at home, I was the one who cleaned, cooked, ironed Ember's clothes, handled chores they didn't want to bother with. If I tried to study, they said I was wasting time. If I asked for help, they called me ungrateful. Holden watched her like someone witnessing a truth he'd always suspected. They told everyone I lacked ambition, Raina continued. But they never mentioned how they refused to pay for my college applications. How they told neighbors I ran away when I left for work. How they told extended family I was too sensitive, too slow, too troublesome. Lila stepped forward, shaking. Raina, stop this. You're embarrassing yourself. No, Raina cut in sharply. I'm exposing you. Gasps cracked through the audience. She held up another document. And while they were busy pretending to be the perfect parents, their business, Aldridge Enterprises, was falling apart. But instead of asking for help, they blamed me. They claimed I was the reason nothing succeeded. She let the silence thicken. So I bought it. The room exploded with whispering. I bought the business you failed to manage. I rebuilt the company you destroyed. And I did it without 1 ounce of your support. Raina's voice hardened. Every decision, every recovery plan, every contract mine. Morris lunged forward. You don't own anything. Those papers. They're legal, Raina snapped. And so is the fact that I am now the sole authority over the company's finances. Which means your salary, your benefits, your future, all depend on decisions I make. Lila staggered back as if the words physically hit her. Raina lowered the papers. But after today, I won't be supporting people who discarded me. Not anymore. The hall erupted into full chaos. Aunts and uncles rushed toward Morris and Lila, shouting questions. Cousins whispered furiously. Ember's bridesmaids scattered, faces pale with shock. Ember herself let out a shrill scream, mascara streaking. You ruined my day. You did this on purpose. Raina didn't even look at her. Guests turned toward Raina, not with pity, not with confusion, but with dawning respect. For the first time in her life, they finally saw her not as an assistant, not as a shadow, but as the woman who rose from everything meant to break her. And she stood there, Calm in the center of the storm she no longer feared. The chaos inside the reception hall faded behind me as I stepped out into the crisp evening air. The murmurs, the shouting, Ember's frantic crying. All of it felt distant now, like I was moving through a dream while everyone else remained trapped in their own. I held the folder tightly, knowing it contained the final proof of everything I had worked for, everything I had endured, and everything they would never forget. The garden outside was quiet, illuminated by string lights that swayed gently in the breeze. I took a deep breath, feeling the tension in my shoulders finally begin to loosen. For the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a long time: freedom. Not from the work, not from the struggle, but from the fear that had haunted me since I was a child. I no longer needed their approval. I no longer needed their love or their recognition. I only needed myself. A shadow fell across the path, and I turned to see Holden Mercer standing there, calm and steady. He didn't smile too wide or offer words of pity. He simply extended a hand and nodded. "You did it," he said quietly. "They'll have to live with the consequences now." I nodded, letting out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "I didn't do it for them," I said softly. "I did it for me, so I could finally stand without fear." Holden's gaze didn't waver. "And that's all anyone can ever ask. You faced them, and you didn't let them define you. Not even for a second." We walked together along the garden path. The scent of flowers mixed with the evening air, carrying away the remnants of the chaos inside. I glanced back once, catching a glimpse of my parents standing near the hall's entrance, pale and speechless, trying to process that the daughter they treated as disposable now controlled their business, their contracts, and their future. They were finally facing the consequences of their choices, of every belittling word, every ignored dream, every time they treated me like I was nothing. I thought of Ember, still screaming inside, her perfect wedding day unraveling because of the truth I had exposed. And yet, I felt no triumph in her pain. My victory wasn't in ruining anyone. It was in claiming my power, in stepping out of the shadow they had cast over me for so long. I reached the edge of the garden and paused, feeling the night settle around me. The folder was tucked safely under my arm, a symbol not of revenge, but of resilience. I had confronted the people who had made me small, and I had done it without fear. That was my freedom. That was my closure. Holden fell silent beside me, and I realized I didn't need to explain anything. He understood. I had taken control of my life, my story, and my future. The people who once treated me like a servant would now live with the knowledge of the daughter they never believed in. The daughter who had surpassed them in every possible way. And for the first time, I smiled without hesitation. I was free. Do you think Raina handled her parents the right way by confronting them and taking control, or should she have tried to forgive and stay? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if stories like this inspire you, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story.